Hello, everybody. It's Jason here with Level Head Trading. Going to go over some details with Tesla, and it's pretty simple right now. So what I'm looking at here on the daily time frame is we've got this block of back and forth right here. So as I mentioned before, this area was potentially going to be support. Now it's acting as resistance. So that's there. And here's where we tried to reach up just barely into this section here. And now you see the exponential line, 12 period, lines up with this as potentially being a resistance for a period of time. So we've got this simple block here where you reach the low here down to 180. The high was 196. And what we're doing, it still needs time to play out to make some more definitive statements. But what you have is the low, the high, and then a higher low, which is 182. The low of this day, which was Friday, was 182, which held that low of 180. So you could potentially, move up, again, a little bit more, 2-3%. And I would assume that this will still act as resistance. So you could create a higher, a lower high relative to the 196 during next week of the market, and then just play itself out from there. So in order to change the trend on the daily time frame, you need to get over this, and then if you do, then when you pull back, you need to hold these lows and then continue higher to then confirm the daily uptrend. So that's how the daily time frame looks. But again, I'm thinking that it will not be that easy to change the trend yet. But I think we're going to get close, and this coming week might be the time, and I'll tell you why, that we set the final low and then build from there. So now going into the weekly chart, this is the weekly chart here. I took out the trend line just to kind of make things a little easier, not to have so many lines in the way. So, like I had said before, I was thinking that potentially we will have a few weeks where we form that bottom, that it wouldn't just be simply you get down to a level and then you just in another week completely change things around. So there's going to be another aspect that I'm going to add in here, which I didn't. I should have spotted this before, but I didn't. But anyway, so on the weekly time frame, things are not that extreme as far as the RSI. I was thinking that we should maybe get down into the lower 30s where we bottom out. And so as you see this RSI level during last week, because we had this a little pressure pushing up, we push the RSI back up to now 37. So that's not oversold. So that's the first week. This is the first week after the big downward push. And so there's two things I'm going to bring into the picture now. One is I'm noticing how this is very similar to when Tesla set the monthly higher low, and that is right here, the 152. And notice from the low, you essentially created a bull flag in this area of consolidation right here. You went from here and you went straight up, right? You had no period of consolidation all the way up here. And then you had a month where you traded sideways, created in a sense, a lower low, a lower high to that, and then a lower low. And then that was the bottom. And if you look at this, if you look at the shape of this descending area here where you finally hit the higher low relative to that. If you look at that, it's basically a flag that's very similar, but in a much bigger chunk of time. That's exactly what this is looking like. You see, this and this are very similar because what you're trying to establish is a new higher low at some point. So from here to here, then you create that higher low on the weekly time frame, and it looks very similar to how this looks. So if I'm correct, we hold this low of 150, and the new higher low lands somewhere in this area here. And I'm going to adjust that. Potentially that higher low now might be somewhere from about 175, 176 to potentially as low as 165. And that will still create a higher low on the monthly chart. So again, this is looking very similar to this time frame here. It's just this is taking a longer time to play out. You had a bigger move overall from this to this. You had a basically 200% move. And so now it's one time, two times, and third time maybe will be the charm. Third time might be the charm. This, it just had two levels of going lower, and then it found its bottom. But the third thing I'm going to, or the second thing I'm going to introduce is the 2-week time frame. And the reason I'm going to put the 2-week time frame is a long pause. That was more clear as to how the bottom was set. So now I'm going to go into the 2-week time frame right here. So these candles are 2 weeks of action, 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, and the next 2 weeks. And you still end up with the same flag. So this final candle here, it took 2 weeks for it to play out. The higher low on the monthly time frame, this was 2 weeks of action, 2 weeks of battling, and then you create that wick, like I said, where finally then the buyers came in. There were more buyers than sellers, and then when you finished, you were up here, and that created the new higher low. So this candle is not 2 weeks yet. This candle started last week on the 29th. So this coming week, when this coming week finishes, then this candle will still be right here. It's just, where does it finish? How does it look? Will it have a wick and then be right back up here and maybe even higher? Or will it not look like this? But the reason I think it potentially could be the final week is because it looks very similar to this, as creating a flag and creating the higher low from that low, and that this 2 weeks into, 2 weeks of a candle here might create that higher low, and maybe one more week after that, somewhere in that time frame. So that's what I'm seeing here. This looks very similar to this. It's just taking a longer time to play itself out, but it is a flag, and it looks like it's lining up to create that higher low to that 150. And it will take time. It will take time for it to play out. So again, that's 2 weeks, 2-week chart. That's what that candle looked like. So if I go back to 1 week, then I'm going to go back to that time frame of that 150 and show you how that looked. So you had that, you had 1 week where that did set the higher low, and then you had this week here. But notice where you finished was higher than that previous week. So that sets that sets the higher low because you break the low of that week. You break above the entire candle of that week. And then you have some consolidation here on this week. And then notice that week right here, you pulled back some more. You pulled back right to about the middle of that candle, and then you continued higher. So you engulfed that week, and that then set the tone, and then you moved up to this area here. So again, this is a 1 week time frame. We're back to the 1 week chart. So potentially we have one more week where we dip down, and potentially that could be the final low, which would be a higher low to that. So that's really all I have to say. This whole thing is looking very similar to this. Very similar. And the other note to make is here is the 200-week moving average. Here's the 200-week moving average. So it's ascending, it's going up. And now we're getting pretty far below it. So unless there's addition, see, that was the other thing that I had said about the news, the bad news and the earnings miss and all that is now it's pricing all of that in. And there's not really anything else left that would really be newsworthy. It's just readjusting to the news and then finding a higher low. But on this 200-week time frame, notice again, you were way below it, right? So we're getting pretty far below it especially if we go further down this coming week relative to where the 200 is. It's all the way up here at $220. So notice how here during this time frame you got above it. You see, you got above the 200-week moving average, pulled back, got back above it, and then you went below it again. And notice here you pushed all the way above the 200-week moving average, and then here it acted as support. You pushed up, but you made a lower high on the weekly time frame to that high, and then you did one more push, and then you got below it again. And that's very similar to how this played out. Here, this particular time frame, right? Look at that compared to this area here. You come down initially, go below the 200 and finish above it. And in this area, you go below the 200 and you push above it, and then you go back higher but create a lower high. Here you go below it, get above it, but you create a lower high to this, and then you get below it again, and then that's the final time. And so to me, this should be the final time where you set your higher low. But the question is, where will the higher low be? Will it be just above 152, which would be quite a bit lower? That would be another 30, that'd be, I don't know, 17, 18% lower. Or will it be, 175 to 165, which is what I'm more thinking, that it won't be that close to coming down to there. And, but anyway, I think this week could be that week where we finally create a candle that's what they call a reversal candle right there, where it's really compact. You have the final people selling, but then by the time the week finishes, it gets back all that it pulled back during that particular week. And then the next week, it continues and starts going back up again. So anyway, that's my video for the final end of the week. And I'd like to get some more subscribers. So if you're watching and you're not subscribed, please click subscribe somewhere in there. I know I need to add that little thing that pops up on other people's videos. But so that's what it is. That's what it is. Again, that daily time frame, it's just back and forth here. So this is a block of activity that will either break to the upside or break further to the downside. And the reason I said 165 was because when I measure, when you're in a block of time that is just stagnant, where you're stuck in this equilibrium, typically what happens is when you break out of that block, you move an equal amount of distance to the upside or to the downside. So the distance from the top to the bottom is about $15 to $16, and the bottom is 180. And so, all right, I'm going to have to go. But anyway, the distance is about $15, $16. So to the downside, calculating that potentially another $15 to the downside, which would bring it to 165.